All right. See how we're doing here. Okay, I don't know if anybody can hear me if they're in yet. All right. If anybody's in and you guys can hear me, somebody mind letting me know in the chat. If you can't, that would also be good to know. Otherwise, we can start looking at some of these questions I got. Perfect. All right, cool. So I assume most of you guys already know me. My name's Sam. I own and run West Meadow Rabbits. And it looks like I've got a few questions already coming in the chat. Plus, I have some that you guys had emailed over. So we're going to try to answer those today. Not going to do this super formally. So if you've got a question, throw it in and I'll just answer it in the order it comes. So it looks like we've got some already. So do you add a lot of sticks, leaves, etc. to the cages? Seems like it makes way more of a mess. So I do have some videos on this, but I do feed leaves, sticks, branches, the whole thing right in. I do that for a couple reasons. The rabbits really, really love to chew on what we would call sticks, which is a branch typically less than 3 inches in diameter. The smaller it is, the better for the rabbits. They'll eat the living underlayment of the bark called the cambrium. They absolutely love that stuff. So they will eat all that. And if you leave it in there for a couple days, there's not going to be much left except a nod stick basically. And that's so small. I mean, I'm not throwing huge branches in there. You can just take that out, throw it under the cage where the manure pile is, and that adds a nice source of carbon, which will help kind of make compost under the cages in the manure pile as well. So to me, it's an added benefit. There's no need to try to separate the leaves off the sticks. I feed black locust pretty commonly, as some of you guys may know, and that actually has thorns on it. And the rabbits do a pretty good job of eating around that. I try to avoid the really thick branches with the gigantic thorns, and if I see any, I'll knock them off. But even with that, they'll strip those things down to just a little bit of a stick that's left. So go ahead and go nuts with feeding them sticks and leaves. They won't leave much, and anything that falls through, it's just going to help your rabbit manure break down. So double win there. That's the thoughts on that. Let me see what else we got here. Obviously, if anybody else has any questions, feel free to throw them right in the chat. So here's one I have from email, which is asking about keeping rabbits separate and what size cages to keep them in. As some of you may know, I'm not super hot on colonies for this exact reason. It really is not smart to keep any adult rabbits together for extended periods of time. It may be fine, could be fine for a week, could be fine for 3 years. It's always fine until it isn't. Rabbits can be very aggressive and territorial, and they are more than capable of maiming and killing each other if it comes down to that. So, rather obviously, bucks should not be kept together after puberty, which is usually around 4 months, regardless of even if they were raised together. They will fight, and sooner or later it will be bloody. Does, you've got a little bit more of a window there. You could leave them together if they're from the same litter. You can leave them together pretty much until you're ready to breed them. But when you do breed your does, they need to be in separate cages because it's going to, at the very least, be very stressful for the doe that is having the babies. And at worst, they can actively harm each other or the kits. As far as cage size goes, my typical cages for a breeding doe and her litter, I want to say they're 30 inches deep and 36 inches wide, 2 feet tall. That's that's my typical size that I do for a breeding doe. Bucks can be a bit smaller. You could go 30 by 30. I don't like to make it too small because the doe goes to the buck's cage. So you do want to have some room in there. That's definitely bigger than industry standard. But that's a welfare thing for me. I know some people get super annoyed that I raise stuff in cages. So I like to make it as spacious as I can within reason. So that's the cage size I use. So it pretty much covers that. What else do we got here? So yeah, all right. So a few more emailed questions, and again, guys, if you have any, you can just throw them in the chat, and I'll answer them. Do I know if it's good to feed rabbits quinoa, amaranth, buckwheat, sorghum, fields, sweet peas, beans, anything like that? Yes, you can feed these things. This individual sounds like they're looking for formulating their own rabbit's diet. I'd really recommend the book Beyond the Pellet if you want to get super deep into the nuances of forming your own rabbit's diet. But long story short, any diet you're feeding your rabbits should be light on grain, heavy on fiber, and you can adjust that ratio based on how fast you're trying to grow out the rabbits and how much breeding you're doing. But long story short, rabbits don't need to eat any grain if they're eating significantly nutritious leaves, but you can basically feed them anything you would feed to sheep is usually a good rule of thumb for what's okay to feed to rabbits if you can't find any information. All right. Another question in the chat here. Oh, this is an interesting one. What kind of force is required when using the hopper popper, which is for those of you guys who haven't seen the video on butchering meat rabbits that I have, it's the metal bar that goes on the side of a wall or something, and it's kind of at an angle. You stick the rabbit's head in there and you pull it down, and it dislocates their neck. It's my preferred, but it does require a bit of force. It's hard to say exactly how much. It depends on your breed and the age of the rabbit. The younger the rabbit and the smaller the rabbit, the less force it's going to require. Like if you're talking an older 12-pound New Zealand doe, it's going to take a bit of effort. I don't know if I have a good way to actually describe it. Quail's easy. You could pull their heads off with your hands, not to sound too barbaric. But compared to a rabbit, I would say it probably requires like a strong pull. Like if you were pulling on a rope to lift up I don't know, maybe a 10-pound weight. If you've ever done something like that, used a pulley, about that level of force. It's more important that it's direct and fast and consistent rather than the actual amount of force that you have to apply. I don't know if that's super helpful, but it's very dependent on the rabbit. Yeah, quails is pretty barbaric. The first time I heard that, somebody was like, "Yeah, just pull their heads off," and I was like, "My God!" But it's true; they do come right off. It's the quickest way to do it. That's what you get for meat, right? All right. Let's see other questions we've got here. Apple cider vinegar, what's the deal? That's a good question. If you've talked to any rabbit breeders, they'll tell you about apple cider vinegar and how it's the cure-all for everything. And I tend to agree. I can't say anything specifically that'll help with. It's not mandatory. The ratios, there's a bunch of different ratios out there. Usually it's a few tablespoons per gallon, give or take, depending on what you're looking for. If you're looking to treat a specific condition, I would reference whatever information you're looking to get that from. But it does work. Apple cider vinegar definitely does work. I use it as a breeding aid. If I've got a really stubborn rabbit that doesn't want to breed, I'll throw some apple cider vinegar in the water, along with all the other tricks that I do to try to get them to breed. And it helps. I can't document it scientifically, but can't hurt. That's for sure. And the rabbits absolutely love apples, so that's always good. All right, meat rabbit breeds. That's another good question. How do the cream rabbits compare to New Zealand's and Californians? By that, I mean, I think they're meaning cream d'Argent, which is the French breed. No rabbit is going to beat the New Zealand's as far as meat quality, quantity, growth rates, everything. They're the best. There's absolutely no competition. Californians are a close second. They're typically used in commercial hybrids, the Californians and New Zealand's. So those two are going to be your best meat rabbits as a general rule. That being said, any of the meat rabbits that have a commercial type, which is I've talked about in some videos, it's kind of like if you're looking at the rabbit from the side, above the shoulders, it rises slowly and then drops down really steeply at the rump with nice round hindquarters. Any rabbit that's got that general shape is going to be a good meat rabbit. You just have to work on breeding your genetics. You also, it's not just about the body, it's the litter size, the mothering instincts, the quality of the pelt, the immune system. So it's more to it than just how the rabbit looks. I'm actually covering what I think are the best breeds in the next video coming out. I want to say a week from now, or possibly 2 weeks, depending on how busy I am. But yeah. Oh, here we go. To improve the receptiveness of dams, have you ever practiced doe litter separation in your breed back cycle with your rabbit? Not exactly sure what that is, so that should answer your question there. Typically, you want to breed a doe right when you're getting ready to wean the litter. That's when they're most fertile. That's usually around 6 weeks of age. So your does are going to be most receptive to your bucks if it's at about 6 weeks of age for that current litter. That's a pretty aggressive breeding schedule. You could do it, but it's going to wear your does out faster. I like to wean at 8 weeks, and I also like to breed at 8 weeks. But the closer you breed the doe to when she's weaned, the better she's going to be as far as fertility and receptiveness to mating. This is really important if you like to breed through the winter, like I do. So if you keep that doe breeding, you should have no problems rebreeding her. If you wait an extended period of time between breedings, you're going to have a much, much more difficult time getting her to breed again. I kind of look at it like running an engine. If it's been sitting for a year, you're going to have a really hard time getting it going again. But once it's going, if you keep it going, you'll be fine. Let me see here. Do I have any favorite recipes? I do have a lot of favorite recipes for rabbits. That is another video that I definitely need to make. My wife's Greek, so they have a lot of good recipes. Usually some variation of boiling or steaming the rabbit to kind of low and slow cook it. Best rabbit I ever had, though, was at a restaurant in Vermont. It was rabbit loin, and it was deep fried in a buttermilk batter, and then they put some kind of cream aioli on top of it. My God, it was amazing. I've been trying to remake it, but in general, fried rabbit loin is absolutely fantastic. You could soak that, you can brine it, which makes it even better. Let it soak in salt water, and then you can batter it with some kind of buttermilk batter, deep fry it like you would chicken. It is fantastic, and you could do that with any of the parts of the rabbits. You just have to debone them. So easy enough and very delicious. What are the best ways to accommodate rabbits? Can you keep rabbits 24/7 on a tractor, or do you prefer cages? This is a good one with the rabbit tractors. Now, I've been pretty outspoken with my thoughts on rabbit housing because I see a lot of homestead videos doing stuff that I would find questionable at best. And, a lot of times they have really bad results. They'll post this video being like, hey, look at the way I'm keeping my rabbits. Isn't this great? Nature's always right. And then a year later, you'll see a video like, all our rabbits died. And I feel bad for these people. I want to see them succeed. I want to see people raising rabbits, but I'm kind of like, this I could have told you this was going to happen. So tractors are fine, especially for grow outs. They're a really great way to get it free food and have them mow your lawn. The only risk with tractors is diseases in your area, specifically RHVD, depending on where you are in the world. It's new to the US, but it is spreading. If there's a large wild rabbit population in the same area where your tractors are, it's not guaranteed that anything will jump, but it's possible. So by keeping them on the ground, you run that risk. On the flip side, the benefit is you're getting an absolutely ton of free food for very little effort on your part. So my default recommendation is if you're new at rabbits, start with the cages. It's the most safe, the most predictable. You're going to be able to control all your variables, get some learning underway. And then as you feel more confident with that, you can look at the various rabbit tractor designs out there. And I would only ever bother putting my grow outs in the tractor. So maybe that's a mother and her litter to just kind of get that extra feed. You could have a separate tractor for your buck, but that seems like a lot of effort from one rabbit just to be moving it around. And you have to move them every day, again, for disease purposes. You also want to make sure that the bottoms are either you could use cattle panel if it's small enough that the rabbits can't get through, or smaller wire. So your goal is to let as much grass through as possible without allowing the rabbits to dig out or other animals to get in. So tractors are fine. They're a nice way to kind of capture that sustainability and self-reliance if you're looking to do that. But as a default place, start with cages, build up some experience, then work on the tractors. I definitely don't recommend colonies, as I've said before. All right, so let's see what else we got for questions here. Okay, here's a question. How do you tell if a female is pregnant, and how do you tell if it's getting ready to give birth? Pregnant is hard. They only gestate for 30 days. The best way is to palpate them at around the 14-day mark. It's kind of hard to do, but you just reach under the belly and you feel towards the back. And if you look in vet books or the book Rabbit Production, you can see where the ovaries are. And you want to feel right there. And basically, you're feeling for grape sized lumps. If you feel those, there's a very good chance she's pregnant. And if she's a good rabbit, before she gives birth, she's going to start running around the cage like a psycho. If you feed hay, she's going to be grabbing that hay and like kind of carrying it like a dog. It's a really weird behavior to see a rabbit do, but that is a sure sign that your rabbit is about to give birth, and you want to get that nest box in there ASAP. When in doubt, put the nest box in 5 days before you think she's going to give birth. As a general rule, that'll be 30 days after she mated with the buck. So can't hurt. And if it ends up being a false pregnancy, then that kind of stinks, but just try again. All right. Is rabbit meat something you could have daily in your experience? Is it as versatile as chicken meat when it comes to recipes? Good question. I'm sure some of you guys saw the controversial rabbits versus chickens video. And oh boy, did I get a lot of comments on that. But in my mind, rabbit meat is almost as versatile as chicken. Depends on how you're cooking the chicken. It's most similar to chicken breast, in my opinion, as far as use. It's definitely leaner than the dark meat on chicken. But if it's, especially if you debone it, you can pretty much use it in any recipe that you would use chicken in, which is why I don't have a lot of good like rabbit recipes, because I just sub it in for chicken. The only things you want to be aware of is it is on the lean side. So make sure you're using some kind of fat or you're cooking it low and slow. But otherwise, you definitely could use it every day. It's certainly a staple in a lot of parts of the world. There's no issues using it every day. It just takes kind of getting used to the rabbit anatomy, quartering the animal, deboning. That's a separate process. I mean, we Americans are so used to getting a nice chicken breast in a package, but if you're already used to cutting up a whole chicken, you'll have no problems with rabbits. Okay, so this is a good question too. Somebody said they've heard of special bloodlines for commercial meat breeds like the New Zealand. Have I ever come across these bloodlines, and what are the comparative advantages? I need to make a video on this. It's so important. The line of the rabbits is almost, if not more important than the breed. So you can have two New Zealands and they can perform totally differently depending on what that breeder was working on. So the commercial lines of New Zealand's are definitely more optimized for meat production. If you were looking to get a rabbit, doesn't matter what the breed is, even if it was New Zealand's, I would be wanting to buy from a breeder whose lines are focused on meat production and characteristics. So let me give you an example. I raised the New Zealand Reds. These are kind of a rare variety compared to the whites. So a lot of the ones that are bred by show guys. They want to show the rabbits, and they don't necessarily value the same things we as meat breeders value. So yes, it's a New Zealand and it's showing the meat distribution is going to be great. The pelt's going to be great. It's going to look great, but it may only have 3 kits in a litter because that breeder has only been focused on how it looks to win shows. It's not worried about production. So on the flip side, you may have a New Zealand that's maybe it's not as pretty as a show rabbit, but it's having, 9 kits a litter. Those are all going to be 5 pounds at weaning time. And yeah, the adult rabbit might not win shows, but the kits are, great fryers. So while I don't know any specific lines off the top of my head, in a general way, lines for any breed of rabbit are just as important as the breed itself. Don't think just because you got a New Zealand or you got a Californian that you've got a great meat rabbit. You need to know about that line, which is basically the genetic history of what that breeder has been breeding for, and see if that is in line with your goals. Another thing to think about is if you want to, go totally off grid and raise these things without any pellets, and you're buying from a breeder who has only fed pellets and has never even fed hay, they may have some digestive issues. And that's where you hear you hear it in the community a lot, or you'll hear it when you talk to people about rabbits. Oh, you got to be careful. If you switch their feed, they're going to drop like flies. It's not really true. It depends on what they've been eating. So if your New Zealand's that you bought have only ever eaten pellets and you throw them out in the pasture, you might run into some serious problems. So the moral of the story is make sure the breeder you buy it from is breeding to match your goals. So don't just think because the breed is what it is, and that's the sticker name, that everything's going to be fine. So the line really matters. I don't know about any specific lines, but definitely something to ask about when you're looking to get any kind of meat rabbit. All right, let's see what else we got here. All right. Thanks for tuning in, by the way, guys. Kind of nice. Always fun to chat with everybody. All right. Anybody else got any questions, comments, or concerns? We've got one more emailed one here. This is a good question, too. What's a good litter size, especially for New Zealand? But any meat rabbit, bigger is not actually better. So you got to remember, a rabbit typically only has about 8 teats, should anyways. That's another thing you should call if they've got less than that. More than 8 is not actually better because those rabbits aren't going to have as much access to milk. So while you'll have a bigger litter, when it comes to 8 weeks, you'll have 13 rabbits, but they're all only going to be 2 pounds because they didn't get as much milk. On the flip side, if you have 5 kits in a litter, that's kind of my minimum. Those kits will be huge because they've gotten so much milk, plenty of milk, but you only have 5. So I generally find between 5 and 9 is the Goldilocks zone for any meat breed. That's typically what you want for your litter sizes. So for the smaller breeds like the Florida White, okay, that's going to be closer to 5. Bigger breeds like New Zealand, they might be able to pull off 10 pretty well. But 5 and 9 is a good generalization of a good litter size that you want. All right, what else do we got? Supplements. Okay. Somebody asked what supplements I would feed: pumpkin seeds, oat, flax. Would I buy these products in bulk? Dr. Peter Cheek's YQ supplement. I'm not huge on the supplements, and I'm not huge on grain in general, unless you're showing. A lot of show guys have all kinds of tricks that they do to try to make the rabbit's coats look nice. If you're just doing this for meat, you really don't have to reinvent the wheel. I certainly wouldn't buy this stuff. So if you want to grow something and source it off your lands, go nuts. If the rabbits, they can eat it. If you want to supplement them with oats you happen to be growing, that's fine. I would not waste my money buying grain or oats or seeds for meat rabbits unless I was showing, because it's not going to do much more, and it's definitely not worth the money. All right. Any other questions, guys? There's a good follow-up there. Is it possible to raise rabbits with mostly hay, green scraps using minimum pellet feed? What are the crops you would plan to achieve this? Yes, it is possible, and I would recommend it if you can do it. In the summer, I try to get 60 to 80% of my rabbits' feed from, my land and not pay for pellets. In the winter, that's a little more difficult. You can do it, but just requires planning ahead. If I had to pick crops that you could grow, I've covered them on the channel before. Black locust is an amazing tree if it's in your area. It's got a similar nutrient profile to alfalfa. Alfalfa is always the foundation of pretty much every pellet, so you could just grow that. It's definitely a crop that is grown in a pretty nasty way, typically GMO, pesticides. So if you feel like growing your own, you could do that. Any kind of legume with a high protein and calorie content should be the foundation of your diet, with other plants coming in for taste, minerals, and fiber. So basically, I can't name the specific plants, but I know in the South you guys have, I think it's like kudzu or something like that, which is another plant that is similar to alfalfa. So look at where you are, look at the nutrient contents of whatever alfalfa has, find the plant in your climate that mimics that. There's your foundation, and then build other plants on top of that for variety and mineral content, and you should do okay. And if you have to supplement with grain, you can do that, but it is totally possible. If you're really interested in going fully off the pellet, I would recommend a book, again, Beyond the Pellet. It basically covers in detail how to build that diet. If you're looking to get 80% off the pellet, your life's a lot easier because you can supplement with that pellet. It covers your bases. It covers the vitamins and trace minerals and stuff like that. And then you can get most of your feed off the pellet, save you a ton on feed. It's much easier to do in the summer. Oh, here's a good one. How long does it take in a normal week to maintain a rabbitry like mine? This was a funny thing in that chicken video too. I got some comments, people like saying rabbits take so long compared to chickens. And I'm like, Not if you've got it set up right. I've got on any given month, I've usually got between 15 and 20 breeders. And sometimes they have kits, sometimes they don't. So assume half of those have kits at any given time. It probably only takes me about 15 minutes a day to take care of all the rabbits. And I know that sounds pretty fast. Even in the winter, I don't have an automatic watering system in the winter. I don't have any heater. 15 minutes. I've got it set up so everything is super efficient. The feed is accessed from outside the cage. The water I can access from outside the cage. The hay mangers hang on the side of the cage. You just stick the hay in. So typically my routine is in the morning, I come out, all the rabbits get hay, and this is the winter, obviously. All the rabbits get hay, top off the waters, leave them be for the day. At night, come out, top off the waters again, pellets, done. Never, rarely more than 20 minutes, typically only 15 for 20 rabbits. Now, granted, once a week, I like to get out there and do the breeding and, take care of them, health stuff, trim the nails, that kind of thing. So figure on average 15 minutes a day, a couple hours a weekend, give or take. And then every few months, dedicate a solid 8 hours to cleaning everything out, sterilization, all that kind of stuff. That's typically what it looks like. And again, you want to think for efficiency. You can really speed it up. 1 acre land, semi-ruler, East Europe. Okay, so this person is in Eastern Europe. They're talking about their climate is -5 to 107. That's a pretty big swing, but it's within the rabbit zone. I'll tell you, they'll have a lot easier time with the -5 than 107. Rabbits are much better at taking cold than heat. I mean, I have a breeder friend who raises rabbits up in Alaska in the US. So it gets a lot colder than -5, and they can do it. It's just making sure that they have access to water. And it's actually really important in the cold, too, because a rabbit can take pretty much any cold temperature as long as it can digest its food. So you increase feed in the winter, but the real limit on how much feed a rabbit can eat is how much water it can drink. So you see people running into problems because the water freezes. The rabbit's not getting enough water, can't digest the food, can't stay warm, dies in the cold. The issue is the water, not necessarily the food. So if you keep them watered, they can take pretty much any amount of cold. 107 is pretty hot. I would consider fans or misters at that point, but I imagine that's only for a few days if it's getting that cold in the winter as well. Hard to say, though. All right, here's another question. Heard copper supplementation for general livestock tends to mitigate the negative effects of high climate temps. What's my view? No idea. I've never supplemented copper. I'm always skeptical with strong concentrated mineral supplements like just copper alone. I'd be a little cautious about that. The biggest thing that's going to affect your rabbit's heat resistance is genetics. So again, I have friends who are all over the world raising rabbits. I mean, Thailand, Africa, you'll see comments on a lot of the videos from people from those countries. They get a lot hotter than anywhere in the US except maybe southern Florida and southern Texas. If your rabbit is bred for it, it'll be able to take the heat. And if your rabbit is bred to take the cold, it'll take the cold. So most important thing when it comes to climate is get rabbits that are from around you and already used to that temperature. So I get emails all the time from people like, can you ship me rabbits? I'm down in Texas. I say, don't buy rabbits from me. My rabbits are used to New England climate. They're going to have a really hard time down in Texas. Would I consider something as extreme as trimming rabbits fur over very hot parts of the summer? No, I would not. Again, it's more important that the animal is, if there's breeders around you who are raising them, you'll be able to raise them. Just get that stock. Trimming the fur on rabbits is a big no-no. It can actually kill them, believe it or not. They're very sensitive. And without fur, a cooler night can actually be very hard for them. So I wouldn't mess with rabbits' fur unless they're Angoras, but that's a whole separate thing that I don't really handle. Why do rabbits urinate on litters? They shouldn't be doing that a lot. If they are, it's probably because they're spending too much time in their nest box, which you don't want. And a rabbit should instinctively not want to spend a lot of time in the nest box. The does really only should go into the nest box to nurse, and then they stay away from it. And if you think about that, that makes sense in the wild. If the doe's hanging around the nest box, she's going to attract predators. So if you find a doe that's spending a lot of time in the nest box, pooping in the nest box, peeing in the nest box, probably should consider culling that doe because that's not necessarily a good habit. Or if your cage is really small, make it bigger. Or if you don't have a resting board in your cage, which are those plastic things you'll see in my cages, or any kind of hard surface or any surface that can get them off of the wire, basically, consider putting one of those in there because they may just be tired of standing on the wire. And some rabbits don't mind the wire at all. I have resting boards in some cages. The rabbits will never use it. They'll just look at it, chew it, knock it over. And then I have rabbits that like to spend all day on the resting board. So just make sure you're providing that option regardless. Should take care of an issue where a doe is spending too much time in a nest box. All right. What else do we have? Anybody else got any questions? Thanks again, guys, for tuning in today. How much space do you need for rabbits? We did cover this a little earlier, but I'll touch on it again. Typically for a doe, New Zealand, which is 10 to 12 pound rabbit, you want a 30-inch by 36-inch floor space in a cage. That's a good rule of thumb. It's a little bigger than typical, definitely bigger than what you see in the industry. But I think from a humane perspective, if you're wanting to raise your own meat, you probably care about that. That's more than enough room for a doe with a good size litter. Bucks, you could do 30 by 30, even a little smaller if you wanted. But more floor space is definitely better. Rabbits aren't like chickens. They don't like to roam around too far. So it's not a huge deal, but I like to provide it. And I also, one of the key details on my cages that are different than most standard cages, I make sure the height from the floor to the ceiling is at least 2 feet. The reason I do that is because rabbits like to stand up on their hind legs and look around. It's a very natural behavior for them. Industry standard is 18-inch cages where it's a little bit cramped and they can't really do that. I find the 2 foot tall cages just really opens things up, makes the cage much bigger, feels much more open, easier to get in there too. So those are my typical measurements. I'm honestly thinking about launching a Patreon and getting my cage plans professionally drafted so that people could download them if they donated up there, which would be nice because it costs a bit of money to get them professionally laid out, but I think it'd be super useful. Oh, here you go. Here's a good one. This is the common wives' tale you hear. Don't touch the babies in the litter or the mother will eat them. I hesitate to call it a full-on wives' tale because it's somewhat true in wild rabbits. Basically, if a mother rabbit is eating the kits, it's because she's super, super, super stressed, which is really bad. And that can happen for one of two reasons. It can be your husbandry, your setup is very stressful. There's some kind of external stimuli going on that's stressing her out, or it could be bad genetics. Generally speaking, we want calm rabbits and we want good mothers. So either way, it would be a cull. If your doe is eating her litters, cull regardless. It's good to know the root cause, but if you have your setup the certain way, you want your rabbits to be successful in that setup, breed for the ones that do well. So long story short, if your setup is good and you've been breeding correctly, there's absolutely no issue touching the litters. You should be able to touch them, no problem. I touch them multiple times. You got to check on them, sex them, see how they're coming along, make sure they don't have nest box eye. You need to be able to get in there. So not touching them is not going to do anything, especially if they're bred correctly. What is a good breed for beginner? The best breed for a beginner is the one that's near you, the one that you can find breeding stock for. Barring that, I would always recommend the New Zealand. You can't go wrong with it. And the reason I talked about earlier, the difference between lines and breeds, and the line is super important. But that being said, because New Zealand's are so popular, even the mediocre New Zealand's are better than average because just think about it. If there's thousands of New Zealand breeders, you've got all those breeders working on traits at the same time. So yeah, one breeder might focus more on the shoulders. One might focus more on the hindquarters. If you get one from each and breed them, boom, you've got a great rabbit. Whereas if you've got a really rare variety, like one of the heritage varieties, and there's only maybe 50 breeders, there's a lot less animals out there to work with. So their bad traits are going to be a lot more common. So I'm not saying New Zealand is the best because it's objectively better than some of these other meat rabbits. There's just so many more people breeding them that those bad traits get weeded out a lot faster and those good traits get concentrated faster. That being said, you got to be really careful. Make sure you find a reputable breeder. Don't buy meat mutts off of Craigslist unless it's a breeder you advertise, you go, you talk with him or her, and the line matches what you're looking for. That's one thing. But again, don't get too hung up on the breed and think just because this breed is supposedly a good breed or Sam said it's a good breed means this is going to be a great rabbit. That's only part of the story with all those things. Let's see what else we've got. Any other questions, guys? I think I already said it. If you're still here, thanks again for tuning in. This has been pretty fun. We've covered some good stuff. Obviously, this is going to be posted as a recording. Oh, here's a good one. What's your view on the Tamuks versus the New Zealand Whites versus the Callies? Tamuks, also known as the Altecs, are a hybrid rabbits trying to become a breed bred by Texas A&M University, I want to say. These are awesome rabbits. They are specifically bred for commercial production, and that is it. And they were bred in the 90s, so it's not like most of these other breeds that are 100 years old. I've heard rumors that they don't get sore hocks even on wire. I've yet to hear if that's true. I'm pretty far from Texas, so we don't see a lot up here. If you're in the South and you've got access to that breed, I would check it out. I wouldn't be surprised if it's better than the New Zealand Whites or close, because it's a newer breed, so it's going to have a lot more vigor. That being said, again, don't just take the breed name. See some proof behind that. Ask the breeder how it is. How their litters. Ask to see the best thing you can ask for, and this goes to another question here: how to identify a good breeder as a beginner? Ask to see the kits. Decide what age you want to process at, which is probably going to be 8 to 12 weeks for most of you, because that's when they're fryers. That's nice, young and tender. Go look at the kits when they're that age, because it doesn't really matter what the rabbit looks like when it's a year old if you're not eating it when it's a year old. You could have a rabbit that looks awful at a year old. The line, just for some reason, as they develop, they just look bad. But the kits are nice and big and beautiful looking at 8 weeks. That's all you need to know, because that's when you're harvesting. So that's really important. And I would say that for any breed, I would want to see the kits. I would want to know how many litter sizes there were. I'd want to know if they have any disease issues. And every herd is going to have its own specific genetic quirks. So I'd want to know about those and that kind of thing. As for identifying, like, what's a good breeder, how do you tell that this person is a legitimate breeder and not just some random ding dong? The questions to ask, I mean, size matters, but it's not the only thing that matters. You, like I said, want to see the kits, want to know the breed, want to know how knowledgeable they are about genetics, want to know how honest they are. One of the things I always tell my customers, I fully disclose the faults that kind of flow through my herd. Every herd is going to have its own genetic issues if the breeder's been doing it for a while, because you can't be buying rabbits, good quality rabbits, every other day. Some of my foundation stock was like $250 a rabbit. You can't replace those every year. So there are going to be some genetic faults that just travel along the lines, but there'll also be some genetic positives. So for me, a good breeder is someone who acknowledges all that. Yeah, expect to run into a bunch of random ding dongs. You will see that. Another good spot too is the ARBA, American Rabbit Breeders Association. They've got a list of registered breeders. That doesn't guarantee that they're good breeders, but it's a good place to start. Also, if you're looking for a specific breed, check that breed's club. So like the New Zealand, I think it's the American Federation of New Zealand Rabbit Breeders. Usually those clubs will have a website, and if they don't have a website, you can email somebody at the club and ask them for like a breeder list. Those are all good places to start. But I mean, again, the proof is in the pudding. Is the place reasonably clean, or does it match what you expect, what you want to do? Does the breeder match that? And you'll be able to tell. I mean, the thing I always get sketched out, number one big sketchy sign for a breeder, they've got an operation that's my size or smaller, and they've got like 6 breeds. There's no way you can handle and maintain 6 good lines of separate breeds and only have 20 rabbits. I mean, I would say a minimum number of rabbits to be a good breeder and have a good line is 15, 10 to 15, maybe 8 if they're switching out their stock a lot. That's kind of the minimum number you need. So if you've got a guy who's got 10 rabbits and he's got, I've got Silver Fox, I've got Rex, I've got New Zealand, and I'm crossing them willy-nilly, and this is that, and it's like, okay, nope, no thanks. You're just messing around. Also on that note, don't buy the Flemish Giant. It's a terrible meat rabbit breed. We're going to cover that in the video too. But anybody who's got a cross says, it's crossed with the Flemish Giant, they're nice and big, run away. All right, what would be the minimum number of rabbits to start with? Enough to allow some selection after the first few litters. Also, you're welcome for answering. My pleasure. This is kind of rabbit math. You can sort of do this yourself based on your own needs, but figure one doe can produce a litter. It takes 30 days to gestate, and then another 60 days to get them to 8 weeks. You could breed the doe at 6 weeks, but I prefer to breed it at 8 when I wean the litters at 8 weeks. So figure that's three to 4 litters a year per doe. So let's just assume averages here. We could do some quick rabbit math. If you were breeding full tilt and you had one doe and she was doing 3 litters a year to be conservative, that's 24 5 pound fryers that you're getting per year. And then every doe added onto that will give you roughly another 24 5 pound fryers per year. And you'll need one buck. One buck can easily service 5, 10 does. In a day, they can typically do 2 to 3, but you really only need one buck. The only issue you run into there is genetics. So there's a couple different ways to tackle this. The easiest way is to just keep your does and swap out your buck every couple of years. So keep the does you like. Don't keep any of your bucks. Buy a new buck. The buck is more important anyways because his genetics go over the entire herd. So if you're in a small operation and you're trying to maintain genetic viability, swap out your buck every year or two, and then just keep the best does that you like, keep the holdbacks, breed them. So your female line is basically staying in-house, you're keeping the best, and you're swapping out the buck every year, and that gives you good opportunity. So if you notice, like, hey, my rabbits, my kits, their shoulders are a little weak or their hindquarters are a little small, the next buck you bring into your herd, buy the buck that has the traits that your herd is lacking. And then you can kind of bring it in and do it that way. So, I mean, for a good size, quasi self-sufficient operation, if you're worried about like shit hitting the fan, you would probably be looking at, I would say, a buck per every 5 does is like the minimum or the maximum amount of does I would put per buck just for genetic viability. But you could do easily less than that if you're assuming you have access to bucks to replace. I mean, you really only need one. Do I keep replacement breeder rabbits from my own kits or purchase new, and how often? So that kind of dovetails with what I just said. It's up to you, really, how many kits you want to keep and how often you want to bring in fresh stock. There are advantages and disadvantages to bringing in new stock. New stock can bring in new diseases, can bring in new genetic faults that you're not aware of. But if you keep your herd entirely closed, over time, you'll notice, even if the quality gets better, like the meat, the immune systems, the litter size, that stuff can tend to deteriorate. So I would try to be strategic. I would keep the rabbits that I like, that have the traits that I want. And if I'm not finding the traits that I want in my own herd, then you go and buy what you need. You bring it into the herd and you just kind of rinse and repeat that process. So, if your rabbits look great, ton of meat, whatever, but they have really bad personalities, go out and buy a buck. Maybe he doesn't look quite as nice as your rabbits because he really perfected the look and the meat distribution, but he's got a great personality. You bring that in, and then you save some of his offspring, and now you've got a rabbit that's maybe slightly less good looking than yours, but also nicer. You breed those back. You just kind of do it strategically. Where can I get the best commercial meat breed proven lines? I've heard of show breeds like Crawford. Oh, that's Crawford's Rock. That's the New Zealand line. Manuel's. Hey, that's funny. I actually have some of Manuel's rabbit. If we're talking about Manuel Hidalgo, he's got great rabbits. Not quite as tough as I like, but he's in California, so what can you expect? It's a big jump for them. Yeah, I mean, where can you find them? That's the $1 million question. Where can you find the breeders? It's start local, start at your feed stores. Like I said, check the breed clubs, the American Rabbit Breeders Association. Word of mouth, hop on the forums, YouTube, and work your way out from there. It's really going to depend on where you are. All right, my rabbit's back paws are always getting sore. Does this happen with you? Yeah, that's sore hocks. Sore hocks is the bane of every rabbit breeder's existence. Basically, it's when the fur on the back of the feet starts to fall off, but that area gets infected. So I differentiate between no hair on the back paws versus sore hocks. They're separate things. Most rabbits that are raised on wire, and even some that aren't raised on wire, will eventually, as they age, lose the fur on the back of their hock, and it'll develop calluses there. That alone is not terrible. It's not ideal, but it's not terrible. The gold standard is to keep as much fur on those hocks for as long as possible, but that's very hard to do in practice. Sore hocks itself is when they begin to crack and get infected and bleed. Now, there's not a ton you can do for this short of not keeping them on wire. And even if you don't keep them on wire, I really want to stress this, they can still get sore hocks. It's mostly genetic, really. So it's not so much to do with the wire as it is with genetics. There are a couple things you should be doing. So I'm going to assume maybe you are doing these, maybe you aren't. If you have a resting board in the cage, you definitely need to have that if you don't already. You want to make sure your rabbits aren't overweight. When you're doing the resting board, make sure it's not a flat piece of plywood. The best ones are these plastic ones you can get from rabbit breeder sites. They've got slates, so manure and urine can fall through. You want to keep that super clean. One of the things I do 2 times a year is I take a flame weeder, and I really need to make a video on this because it's hilarious. I look like a psycho with a flamethrower, and I flame throw all the rabbits' cages. I scrub off the urine residue. Make sure there's no manure. I flamethrow everything, sterilize it. That keeps your wire clean, which will prevent those hawks, if they get irritated, from getting infected. So the 3 key things to preventing sore hawks: number 1, first and foremost, genetics. Try to breed for rabbits that don't get sore hawks and try to buy some. It's very hard to do. I haven't succeeded in doing it, especially because I'm breeding a rarer line like the New Zealand Reds. The whites are pretty good about that, but again, it's not foolproof. And as the rabbits get older, there's only so much you can do. But number 1 is genetics. Number 2, you need to have a resting pad in there. Number 3, keep it sanitary. Even if your rabbits' hawks get irritated, if they don't get infected, you'll usually be okay. If they get really, really badly infected, you might want to look into putting some kind of topical antibiotic, Neosporin. I usually find it doesn't work that well unless you've addressed those other issues, and you've got to be consistent with it, like applying it 3 times a day. Typically, if it's really bad, my advice is to cull and try to find ones that handle it a little better. All right, so got a question here. I just found your channel. It's maybe a newbie question. Welcome to the channel. Thanks for coming. Is there a difference in taste between the various rabbit breeds? Good question. There's definitely a difference in taste between wild rabbit and domestic rabbit, for sure. It's less noticeable than other rabbit breeds. I would say the bigger taste you'll notice is between bucks and does. Older bucks have a stronger taste. When you're butchering them, you have to be careful. They've got scent glands right on either side of their thighs. That stuff, I hate the smell of it. If it gets, all rabbits have it, but the bucks are much stronger. If it gets onto like the meats, it can impart a kind of nasty flavor. But that's pretty much only an issue with older bucks. If you're breeding and culling at 8 weeks, it's going to be a very, very mild flavor. The older rabbits definitely have a stronger flavor than the younger rabbits. You see that with any animal. I haven't noticed big taste between the breeds. Do rabbits get stressed if there are chickens running within a few meters of their cages? Do they get bothered by rooster noise? Rabbits can definitely get stressed by any kind of noise. They're very, for lack of a better term, conservative creatures. They like their schedule. If I go out with a hood on, they freak out. If I go out with an umbrella, they freak out. And if I bring strangers to the rabbitry, they tend to get much more scared of them and kids are running around. So the thing with rabbits is it's not that one thing in particular is going to set them off. They just need consistency. So if you have chickens on your farm and the chickens are there every day, the rabbits will get used to them, no problems. It's when something new or unexpected happens, rabbits get really, really upset. So they love their consistency, they love their schedule. So they can pretty much get used to anything as long as you introduce it slowly and are consistent about it. They're going to have no problem. So if you're thinking of raising chickens under the rabbits to kind of scratch through the manure, eat the worms, eat what the rabbits drop, that's an awesome way to do it. If you introduce the chickens slowly, the rabbits will get used to it. Now, if the chickens are being obnoxious and flying around, the rabbits might stomp their feet and get nervous. But in general, they should be able to handle that pretty well. On the question of taste, does age play into the texture of the meat and the tenderness? Absolutely. Just like with any other animal you would expect. The older the animal, the stronger the taste, the less tender the meat's going to be. So I would say a rabbit over 3 months is considered an older animal. Between 3 months and a year, you can call it a roaster. Before that, it's a fryer. Young rabbit's a fryer. 3 months to a year is a roaster. Older than that is a stewer. And they do that with chickens too. And basically it just tells you how you would typically cook it. So a 3-month-old rabbit or more is going to have a lot more meat on it, but you're going to have to cook it a bit more slowly, be a little bit more mindful of how you prepare it. A young rabbit, you can use it like chicken. It's tender, young, and delicious. A rabbit older than a year is really only good unless you're very used to the taste or tougher texture. It's really only good for low and slow cooking. So that's stews, crock pots, slow roasting in some kind of liquid in the oven, that kind of thing. On the bright side, though, those rabbits are gigantic. You'll get like 6 to 8 pounds of meat and a beautiful pelt. So it might be worth it to you. When purchasing my first rabbit, should I start with breeding age or kits and grow them out myself? That's a very good question. There are pros and cons to both. When it comes to new rabbits, I like to look at any new rabbit you bring into your rabbitry as more or less a wash. And what I mean by that is the transition is always going to be rough. Now, is it as bad as some people say? No. But when you're bringing a new rabbit into your rabbitry, it is never going to do as well as the rabbits you raise there. So it could be genetically identical, but the rabbits that are raised in your rabbitry are used to you. They're used to the surroundings. They're used to the food, the micro environments. Their immune systems are used to it. So the second generation of rabbits, when you buy new stock, are always going to be light years ahead of them. So in my mind, it's sort of like I just like to get when I bring a new rabbit in, I just like to get it out of the way. If I get one litter out of them and then I can keep that litter, I'm happy because that rabbit is never going to be as good as its offspring because it's not used to the way I do things in the microbe environment. So I don't know if this directly answers the question, but typically, if you're anxious to get started and you just want to get it out of the way, breeding age rabbits are fine. Word of caution there, though, do not buy a rabbit that is older than 6 to 8 months and has not been bred. It will be a nightmare. When I first got into rabbits a while back, a breeder sold me, he had no business doing this. He sold me like a 3-year-old doe, and she was nice looking, but I mean, I got screwed because does at that age, they've already gained a lot of weight. If they stop breeding, it's very, very hard to start them back up again. So you either want a very young rabbit or a proven rabbit. That's a whole different animal. So if the doe is proven, but more importantly, if the buck is proven, it's definitely good to buy them older. If I had to pick what I would buy, I would want a 1-year-old proven buck and a 6-month-old never bred doe. The reason that is because the bucks, it can be really frustrating for people. They say, oh, rabbits breed like rabbits. The bucks are clueless. It's so comical to watch them try to figure out which end of the doe they're supposed to be on when they're going away jackhammering. And it can be really annoying because it's like, what the heck, man? I'm out here for an hour waiting for this buck to breed, and he still hasn't figured it out. So bucks can be really tricky, and they're more important than the does, as I've said. So if you can get your hands on a proven buck that's still young, I wouldn't want older than a year. But if he's got 1 or 2 litters under his belt and he knows what he's doing, that's awesome. Does, it doesn't matter quite as much as long as they're, as long as they're either under 6 months or around 6 months and ready to breed, or they've been, they just had a litter. So that's kind of my 2 cents there. Does you typically want younger too because they wear out faster than the bucks. The bucks, they can go till the day they drop. At what age do I remove the kits from the nest box? So other way around, at what age do I remove the nest box from the kits? The kits will never leave the nest box if they had it their way. You have to be careful with the nest boxes because nest box eye, especially with bigger litters, can be really problematic. It's an infection where they basically get pink eye, but the eye seals up, and you can get it open, but they'll usually go blind in that eye, which is unfortunate. So I would say around 2 weeks, you want to take the nest box out because after that, it just becomes a litter box. I kind of do like an intermediate stage depending on the litter. If it's a really small litter, like 5 kits, and it's the middle of winter, maybe I'll wait till 3 weeks. If it's a huge litter and it's the middle of summer, I'll do it at 2 weeks on the money. And they adjust very fast. The main thing you have to worry about when they're outside the nest box is them freezing to death or accidentally getting squashed by their mom. At 2 weeks, they're usually old enough to do that. If you're really concerned, you can take a big pile of hay and throw it in a corner after you take the nest box out. The kits will all burrow into that and they'll eat it too, which is good practice for them to get their body used to eating hay. And it'll fall through pretty much every day. You can replenish it for like 4 or 5 days, but by the time they're 2.5 weeks, they definitely don't need a nest box. Breeding does, usually I would not breed a doe till 6 months. They can breed at 4 months. I wouldn't recommend it. The reason is because even though it's mature, I mean, not to say it's kind of like humans. You're mature in theory at 14, but everybody knows it's a terrible idea. So with rabbits, if you breed her at 4 months, it's like the equivalent of having kids when you're 13 or 14. It's physically possible, but it's really bad for their bodies. It's going to stunt their growth. And while, yes, you're getting rabbits sooner, you're not going to get as many because the doe is smaller, and the smaller the body, the less kits it can hold. So I tend to find that it's better for does to wait until at least 5 months, if not 6, before breeding them. Bucks, you could breed at 4 months if you've got a friendly doe, but bucks are really tiny at 4 months and they're smaller than does anyways. So, and does can really mess up a young buck, as we just said, who doesn't know what he's doing. So you want to make sure that if you're gonna breed a buck at 4 months, put him in with a softball doe, a nice experienced doe who's gonna kind of help him figure things out, and not one who's gonna bite his head off. I mean, if you've got a doe with a bad attitude, best to leave her for the experienced, older, larger, more aggressive bucks. But again, in theory, they could both breed at 4. Bucks, I would say, start at 5 just to be safe, and does 6 if you want to be safe, 6 months just to be conservative. I think it's worth it in the long run. A lot of people hopping in and out. I know probably, if you guys have been here since the beginning, I've probably covered a bunch of questions. Anybody new who's coming in, thanks for dropping in. If you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. I'm happy to answer. In the meantime, tell you guys what I'm thinking for next videos. I'm thinking I want to cover best meat rabbit breeds is probably going to be the next video. I get so many questions about that. After that, I don't know. I've gotten a lot of crazy comments on that chickens versus rabbit video that were pretty funny. Some of them were good for content ideas. Thinking of maybe talking about like the ethics of meat in general, because if I had $1 for every time an angry vegan yells at me about, oh, you're enslaving animals. So maybe I'll make a video talking about that. We'll see. So you guys, anybody else got any questions, comments, or concerns? Do I know if I could? Can you feed rabbits hay rolled for cows? Yeah, rabbits will do fine with pretty much any type of hay. I would say the species is more important than the way it was prepared. So, orchard grass hay I usually find to be the cheapest. That's a good one. Timothy's fine. Any kind of alfalfa's fine. Just be aware that if they're not breeding, it'll make them fat. So alfalfa's fine, but only feed it to breeding does or grow out kits. That's a good rule for hay. But as a general day-to-day hay, orchard grass or Timothy, doesn't matter if it's cow hay. Horses are super picky, so don't feel like you need to get horse hay. That's like top of the line stuff. They're totally fine with cow hay. Is there a good reference book about rabbits you would recommend? I have a video on that, but if I had to pick one and you really wanted to nerd out about rabbits, it would be Rabbit Production. It's a super expensive book. It's actually like a textbook, like for like an agricultural class, but it is so valuable. It's like 200 pages. It's got every possible disease you could see. The thing I love is that they've got a nice diagram of where the ovaries are in a pregnant rabbit, which is super helpful when you're trying to palpate, so you know where to look. That one's good. I always say Beyond the Pellet, if you're looking to formulate your own diet and not feed pellets, that's a really good book. The classic one everybody reads is Story's Guide to Raising Rabbits. That's a good overall one. It goes deeper than some of the other ones, but not as deep as others. And if I ever get my act together, I want to write a book about rabbits someday in the future. So definitely buy that one if I ever get around to doing it. All right. Any other questions, guys? Anything on your mind? Anybody got anything cool to announce? How many of you guys are actually currently breeding rabbits versus considering getting into rabbits? Really curious about that. I always see you can only see so much from the YouTube analytics. It's interesting to know who actually watches these videos. And if you're currently breeding rabbits or thinking about breeding rabbits, why? What made you get into this? Where did you hear about it? I'm super curious. Hi, Orlando. I bought a 50-pound bale of Timothy hay from Tractor Supply for like $30. $30. Oh my God. Oh, geez. Okay, that's a lot. So somebody bought hay from Tractor Supply that was expensive, but then they fed their rabbits hay for cows and the rabbit died. That is odd. The only thing I could think of, I don't know what the breed is, what your setup is, where you're located. If your rabbits are dropping dead, there could be a lot of reasons. That hay could have been carrying some kind of disease. They could have not been used to that kind of hay. I would be more curious, like, what's the species of hay that was rolled for cows? Because, it's hard to say. $30 is insane for a bale of orchard grass hay. I'm not a huge fan of Tractor Supply. I know that's all some people have, and maybe I'm just lucky that I've got like local feed stores run by people in the town. But I pay like $6 for a 40-pound bale of orchard grass hay. Now, granted, with inflation, everything's screwed, but you're going to get the best deals for hay if you can find farmers in your area who are willing to sell hay. Like I said, it shouldn't be an issue. You shouldn't need to feed rabbits super fancy hay, assuming everything's done right. The only thing I can think of too, maybe that hay was sprayed with some kind of pesticide. Rabbits can be pretty sensitive, but if you're gonna switch hay suppliers, definitely take it slow. Introduce that slowly, just because you don't know what could be in them. But I do hear a lot of crazy stuff about people's rabbits dying for no reason, and I'm like, geez, I must have bulletproof rabbits because I do. I'm a terrible, terrible, lazy rabbit farmer, and they do fine. I throw all kinds of stuff at them. If I had people all the time say, "Oh, you're feeding your rabbits leaves; they're gonna die. Those are poison. You're feeding your rabbits comfrey. That's poison." And I'm like, they look fine to me. Yeah, somebody's saying pay $4 a bale for Timothy. That sounds about right. I see people too buying rabbit feed off of Amazon, and I'm like, that is crazy. You gotta find your local feed supplier. Oh, okay. Well, there's a whole bunch of other variables there. So we got this individual who raises the rabbits. They're colony rabbits, so they're in a colony. Which, again, I'm not gonna say that anybody should do anything one way or another, but I'm generally skeptical of colonies. But it was also a baby, so that could have been anything. I wouldn't worry about the hay source then. There's so many variables there in a colony setup. Plus, the fact that it's a baby, it'd be too hard to pin that on the hay. If it was like if all your rabbits died off, then yeah, I'd be worried about the hay. But just one. Yeah, if you're looking at getting off pellets, definitely check out the channel. I've got some stuff on it. Beyond the Pellet is a great book. It's definitely doable. Just takes a little bit of planning. I use them as a supplement, and when I'm feeling lazy. In the summer, if I'm super motivated and I've got time, I feed like maybe 20% pellets for the diet, and the rest I grow myself. In the winter, when I, don't have any time and it's dark out at 3 o'clock, okay, then they're getting 80% of their diets from pellets and hay as a supplement. So you kind of work with the seasons. All right. Anybody else got anything? Comments, questions, concerns? Anybody breed rabbits, or are you guys all just doing this for meat? Anybody sell breeding stock? Anybody show rabbits? Oh man, I just talked for like an hour straight. I'll give it a few minutes. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to throw them in. If you don't, we'll think about calling it. But so you breed them, but you don't raise them for meat? What do you do with all the rabbits that you breed and have? Do you sell a pet market? I'm super skeptical of the pet market. I don't know if anybody's got any experience selling the pet market. I think it's more trouble than it's worth. Tidbits, that's pretty funny. I know you meant to say crop, but it said number one. Yeah, crap. Number one crop I would grow for rabbits, if I had to pick one, this would be tough. Depending on where you are, I would say black locust. Now, it's controversial to introduce that to areas where it's not already growing because it can be very aggressive, but it's like the permaculture dream tree. I absolutely love it. The flowers make the most amazing honey. And even if you don't want to eat honey and harvest it, it's fantastic for pollinators. They smell great. The tree itself is a legume. So if you plant it in like your field, and you kind of want to do savanna style with, your animals, the roots are like the roots of a legume. So they fix nitrogen. I have a couple locust trees. You should see it. The grass under the locust trees is tall and lush, and the grass that you could see exactly where the root system ends because it's fixing the nitrogen. And the wood, if any of you guys have wood stoves or fireplaces, it's exactly like oak. It burns like oak, but they grow so much faster than oak. And they're also, it's hard to get an exactly perfect straight piece, but they're also super rot resistant. So if I had to pick one thing, it would be the locust. If you couldn't do the locust, I would do maybe a willow variety, probably a shrub willow. Comfrey is great too. There's also a lot of common plants that grow naturally in your yard. Plantain and clover are both fantastic. Plantain's got a lot of nutrients and minerals because their roots go so deep. So if you've got that growing around your yard, great for rabbits. Clover is kind of a nice substitute for alfalfa or locust. Again, it's a nitrogen fixing plant, high in protein, high in calories. So those are all good. In terms of food waste, what's safe and what's not. Also, they have to be fresh same day. I had chickens so far, and they literally garbage disposals. Yeah, so that was a comment I got a ton on my chickens versus rabbits videos. That chickens will eat anything. It's absolutely true. I think people really misunderstood that video. I was mostly talking about meat. So yeah, most of the scraps should go to your layers. They're going to do a better job of it, including your meat scraps, by the way, from when you butcher the rabbits. Only things I really feed from the kitchen are, vegetable scraps, vegetable trimmings, really the plant material. I know some people feed like bread scraps and stuff like that. I just don't think it's worth it personally. I'd rather feed that to chickens. If you don't have chickens, you could give it to your rabbits and see what they think. But when it comes to stuff from the kitchen, chickens have the priority. The only things that I would go right to the rabbits are any of your root crops, your, root peelings, leaves, leafy greens. If you buy the carrots from the store with the greens on top, your rabbits will love you, that kind of thing. Fred's thinking about rabbits to be more sustainable. Fred, that's a good choice. You can't beat rabbits in that department. Oh boy, are you trying to sell the talking in the chat here too, guys? If you want to follow along, but if you're talking about trying to sell rabbits on Craigslist, are you trying to sell them as pets? Kenrick raises them for both backyard and commercial purposes. Oh, you're in Trinidad. Interesting. That is really cool. Always love hearing from people from other areas. So you're raising the rabbits in the tropics, and you don't have any issues with that. And yeah, I don't think the pet market is worth your time. Anybody considering selling for pets, it's super competitive. You're not going to beat the cute little Netherland dwarf rabbit, even though I would say New Zealand makes a better pet than a Netherland dwarf. And pet owners can really be a super pain. I mean, they go like, they can either be way, way, way too into it. Like, is this rabbit been like swaddled and brought into the house, and does it sleep with you from the time it was born? Or you get people who you can tell, they just decided this morning that they want to go buy a rabbit. I don't like to sell to people like that. I'm not going to sell if I don't know the situation is going to be successful. In regards to breeding stock in general, if you're trying to sell your rabbits, this has got to be the part 2 to making money with meat rabbits that I made that first video, like, I don't know, 3 years ago now, and I'm going to make a part 2. Breeding stock is super competitive. You've got to really have a competitive advantage. You've got to have your act together. You've got to have pedigreed stock. Basically, it's got to be worth something. So it's not like there's a gradient here. So like you've got the $300 show rabbits, and then you've got the $10 meat mutts. If your rabbits are mediocre and already a lot of people are raising rabbits in your area, you're going to have a super hard time selling them. So, when you go into meat rabbits, there are a lot of other revenue streams that you can get that are super creative. Selling, you probably have better luck selling the manure though than meat mutts. But my point is, when you go into meat rabbits, you have to go in assuming that you're just doing this for the meats. If you want to sell the meat, fine, that could be a business right there. But don't go in banking on the idea that you're going to be able to sell the breeding stock, because you have to be able to differentiate yourself. It's like any other business. It's definitely not something that can be taken casually. And like any other business, you have to build up a reputation. You have to invest in your stock. I make a pretty good amount of money selling breeding stock, but I invested a huge amount of money getting into that breeding stock, getting the stock out from California. And it was 3 does and a buck. It was like over $2,000, because they need health certificates. You have to buy the carrier. The breeder has to send it. Barely any airlines will ship anymore. It's super hard to get good stock if it's not near you. And if it already is near you, that breeder's probably already got a reputation. So getting into breeding stocks is tough. Yeah. See, if you're breeding a mixed breed, it's a meat mutt. You got to, what's your niche? If you're selling like a hybrid, and you're a commercial meat operator and you're going to sell your hybrid, sure, you can back that up because you're selling meat as your full-time hustle. But if it's just, if you're just doing this as a random backyard thing and you're crossing rabbits willy-nilly, you're going to have a super, super hard time selling rabbits. And it's even going to be harder if you're doing it in a colony situation because you're not going to be able to document the genetics that well. Do I sell black locust or starter sticks? I do not. And one of the reasons I don't is because it's semi frowned upon and in some places illegal because it is a super, super aggressive tree. It will absolutely take over. This is a good thing in I know in the South in the Appalachia they use it on sites that have been like strip mined. When they do the mountaintop mining, they plant the black locust because it brings the life back. It's drought resistant, fixes nitrogen, fertilizes the soil, builds the soil. It's a great tree, but in areas where it's not not native, it can be a little aggressive. So I would look around first and foremost if you're interested in black locust. See if it's already growing in your area. If it is, it's super common. I guarantee you'll find it. Go to the side of the highways, abandoned lots. If it's native to your area, it'll be growing there. It's a very distinct tree. You'll be able to find it. You want rabbits for the fertilizer. That's a huge enterprise right there. Honestly, a lot of you guys would probably make more money selling the rabbit manure as compost rather than selling the meat. You can't be beat. That was again another one of the many things I got yelled at in my chickens versus rabbit video talking about the manure. I've done both. I like rabbit manure better because it doesn't need that composting step. It can go right on there. Typically in the fall when my garden's done, I'll clean out all the rabbit areas, dump like 8 inches of rabbit manure on the garden. By the time spring comes around again, it's fully integrated, decomposing the soil. You've got worms everywhere. It's absolutely awesome. It buries anything from last year. You do that for a few years, your garden's going to be on steroids. Yeah, we'll see. There you go. You got, again, following along with that conversation. So you got a Dutch and a Holland Lop, neither of which are really good meat rabbits. And then you've got 5 mixes. You're not going to be selling any of those. I don't think anybody's going to buy those. I'm sorry to tell you. That's something I see a lot. I wouldn't say it's a mistake per se, but you want to start with the end in mind. So those are going to be tough sells for meat rabbits. Now, if you want to raise Dutches and Holland Lops to show, or just because you like the breed and you eat the culls, that's fine. But you have to be maintaining that purebred standard if you want to be able to sell those as any kind of breeding stock at all, which is really where the money is when it comes to meat rabbits, unless you've got a good meat market. I know you guys are kind of all over the place. Definitely see it more in foreign countries. There's a really good market for rabbit meats. I don't think a lot of Americans are aware that there's such a good market for rabbit meat in a lot of different places. I suspect that in Africa and Asia, this is a great enterprise. I've got a lot of viewers who are in Africa, believe it or not, and they're crushing it on actual farms like raising meat. So I think America's a little behind the times here when it comes to rabbits, but I also think that's because we're super rich and we can afford all the fancy meats. But let me not sit up here preaching too much. All right. Anybody else got anything they want to chat about? We're getting to 1 hour and 13 here. I'll keep it going. If I don't hear anything, I'll keep it going for another 2 minutes or so. Give a chance to anybody who wants to jump in, but I think we've covered a lot of stuff. This was super great. I'll obviously post this, so if you missed any of the earlier questions and you feel like watching this through on your free time, we covered a lot of ground, and you'll be able to get those questions answered there. Like I said earlier, I'm thinking about launching a Patreon where I'll just have it so that anybody can ask me a question at any time. Probably be easier, but that's a future project. And if not, call it a day here. Yeah, no problem. Thank you for joining. This was fun. I enjoyed watching all the comments come in real time. Let's see. Good practice too. Do it again in the future. South Carolina pigeon pea trees. Interesting. I've never heard of a pigeon pea tree. I don't know if anybody else has. if they're a legume, you're probably going to get the same benefits. But I know black locust grows down in South Carolina for sure, so you should be able to find some black locust stock down there. I'd be amazed if you couldn't, because it's like I said, go anywhere that's like abandoned or neglected, or the forest is coming back, you'll probably see it. It's a pretty distinct tree. You can see it on pictures online, but it's somewhat hard to miss. All right, cool. Let me just check the email here and make sure no other questions came in. If not, we'll probably wrap it up. You guys, if you have any questions, you can always shoot me an email as well through the website contact form. But otherwise, this was pretty fun. All right, I'm not seeing anything else. So speak now or forever hold your peace. And we can probably wrap this up here. I think an hour and 15's pretty good to call it. Either way, though, yeah. That's a bummer. Yeah, so somebody just jumped in. I don't sell the starts. I didn't actually do that well with Willow. They're asking me where I could buy Willow. It's didn't do that well in my spot. I'm gonna try again when we're moving. So I'm gonna try again. Yeah, somebody else there talked about the pigeon piece. But yeah, unfortunately I don't sell the Willow. Honestly, it's something I would think about doing, but I got my hands full as is. It's just it's a little tricky. But in the future I would. I mean, look up anywhere, any kind of willow is fine. It doesn't have to be a specific variety. Any willow will do. It's just whatever. Again, my advice is always go with what's grown in your area. I think you can even feed them. I feed my rabbits pussy willow, and they love that, and it's a nice ornamental as well. But yeah, thanks again, guys, everybody, for tuning in here. This was wicked fun, and hopefully you guys got something out of it. Save you some time having a Google. If there's enough demand, maybe we'll do another one in the future. Let the channel grow a little more. I had to get approved this time around for the live streaming thing, so I didn't post it in advance so people could know. So next time I do one of these, I'll post it like a week in advance so everybody can kind of plan. But if you guys are all good, unless anybody's got anything else, I'll probably call it here. It looks like somebody just jumped in. I want to give them a chance to ask a question, but otherwise I'm going to call it because I don't think we have anything else. A couple people jumped in. We'll see if they stay in, if they have any questions. But no, thank you for tuning in. I'm glad I could help. It's fun to have everybody here. All right. So I'm not seeing anything. So I'm thinking about calling it a day. Rest assured, if you didn't get your question answered, we'll do this again in a few weeks. Try to do it more on a regular basis if you didn't get your question answered. And if I do the Patreon, I'll be able to answer. Oh, don't worry about it, Patrick. You got any questions you want to ask real quick before I hop off? I'll stay on for like 3 minutes, I think. At 1:20 is a good cutoff point. Anybody else who wants to hop off, I appreciate you guys hanging out. And this is all going to be recorded, so this entire video will be posted to the channel. So feel free to rewatch it at your own time. If I get some time, it's kind of long. I'll try to go through and put the timestamps in. Yeah, exactly. My opinion on culling is with a pellet gun. Don't do that. Bad idea. Trust me, very bad idea. You're going to miss. It's going to be a bloody mess. The rabbit's going to be screaming. Best way to do it is to cull a rabbit, cervical dislocation, break the neck. Whether you want to do that with the hopper popper or the rabbit ringer, it's all the same thing. You can even use the shovel method, but I don't like to cull with projectiles. It's just too much that can go wrong. I mean, the worst thing you can do is screw up a slaughter. If you mess that up, it's going to, for lack of a better term, it'll certainly put you off your appetite, and you won't, you'll have a hard time doing it again. So my preferred slaughter methods are foolproof and easy to do. And they give me plenty of time to back out if I don't feel I'm ready, if I need to adjust. With a pellet gun, you know, rabbit brains are small, and it's not a good situation if you miss. But yeah, that's my opinion on that. I've got a video on processing and slaughtering the rabbits where you can see how I do it. So I'd check that out if you kind of want my take on it. But all right, guys, coming up on the last 30 seconds here. I think we're going to call it here. I know people have been coming in and out. So I hope everybody got your questions answered. If you didn't, we can do this again. This is going to be posted to the channel. So feel free to leave a comment on this video if you want another one of these done anytime. I might do one in another couple weeks. This was pretty fun, pretty informative. If not, like I said, I'm going to probably be launching a Patreon soon, so you'll be able to ask questions anytime you want there. Otherwise, though, I think we're going to call it a day here, as much as I'd love to hang out with rabbit people all day. I think this is good. So anybody who's still on, thanks a lot for tuning in. If you've been here from the beginning, I'm impressed. But thank you, everybody. I will see you guys in the next video. So have a good night. Thanks again.